Thank you for tuning in to Sunday Morning Devotion presented to you by the Christian Education Department here at Greater Bible Way Temple of the Apostolic Faith, where the founder and pastor is the Honorable Bishop Timothy O. Johnson, and our lovely First Lady is Sister Sandra Johnson. Again, welcome to the session, and be sure to tune in next month for our Black Histories Did You Know sessions, featuring our youth at Greater Bible Way Temple in place of the Sunday morning devotions. So let's be in support of our youth by tuning in. You don't want to miss it. Our previous lesson was the ruler who cares for his people. The word that defines Jesus as a leader is servant. He humbled himself and gave his life for us on a cross. This was an unselfish display of servant leadership. That was the last lesson for the irrefutable prophecies that points us to Jesus. Today's lesson is the pitfall of betrayal. In the book of Genesis, Joseph overcame multiple pitfalls, and his example points the way to how we too can avoid life's pitfall. Our lesson passages from Genesis 37 verses 1 through 5, 19 through 24, and 26 and 27. The point is, God is at work even when it's not obvious. The question is, how does God work during the betrayals of our lives? Our memory verses from Philippians 1 and 6. Being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it. Verses from Philippians 1 and 6. Being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. We have three focal passages, and they are: even God's favor can cause betrayal, God works despite betrayal, and God can bless us through betrayal. And that brings us to our first focal passage, which is even God's favor can cause betrayal. Genesis 37 verses 1 through 5, and it reads, And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. The coat Jacob gave Joseph was not only custom made, but it was also a garment designated for the firstborn child. The robe was a sign of the privileges afforded to the oldest child. Not only was Joseph not Jacob's firstborn, but he was also given honor traditionally that should have been for his older brother Reuben. Jacob broke the inheritance tradition for a few reasons, which help us understand his actions beyond Joseph being the son of his beloved wife Rachel. Jacob himself took the privilege of the oldest child when he convinced his older brother Esau to sell him his birthright, and when Rebekah, their mother, convinced Jacob to steal his brother Esau's birthright and blessing at the hand of their failing father, after God told her at their birth the oldest would serve the younger. Jacob's father Isaac was also given the privilege of the oldest child because he was the chosen son God had promised to Abram and Sarai in their old age over his older brother Ishmael. In Romans 9, Paul mentions these two incidents involving Isaac and his older brother Ishmael, and Jacob and his brother Esau, stating that this was done in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls. Paul continues to say, "What then shall we say? Is God unjust? Not at all. But he said to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion." It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy. What if God, although choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath, prepared for destruction? What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? Even us, whom he also called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. Paul said all of this to point to the inclusion of the Gentiles in the plan of God. Joseph's father, Jacob, made a huge mistake impacting his kids and deeply affecting the whole family. Jacob's two most obvious flaws were accepting a cultural view of marriage over God's and favoritism. One was the widespread acceptance of polygamy. Jacob's acceptance of cultural polygamy was the root of his family dysfunction. From the beginning, God intended for marriage to be between one man and one woman for life. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and bonds with his wife, and they become one flesh. Nowhere in Scripture did God approve of multiple marriages. Unfortunately, many in the Old Testament ignored God's plan established in the Garden of Eden, causing rivalries and tension. Jacob's life is evidence of this, with multiple wives and jealousy throughout his family. Another one is obvious favoritism. Because Joseph was the son of his father's favorite wife, Rachel, born in Jacob's older years, he was a more favored child. By the time Joseph reached age 17, jealousy within the family had given birth to hatred, nourished by resentment for the way Jacob favored him over his other sons. The pot of hatred began to boil over when Joseph brought home a bad report about 4 of his brothers. Joseph saw himself as a loyal son. His brothers viewed him as nothing more than a tattletale. Their intense hatred showed itself in their unwillingness to be civil with him. The common courtesy of speaking peaceably to Joseph had been altogether lost in his brothers. To make matters worse, Joseph had an intriguing dream. The details he shared left the impression he would rule over his brothers someday. Their hatred for Joseph grew even more intense. And that brings us to our second focal passage, which is God works despite betrayal. Genesis 37 verse 19 through 24, and it reads, "And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. Hatred for Joseph consumed his brothers, and it boiled over when he told about a second dream. Nobody in the family took the dream well. The scene shifted quickly to the wilderness, where Joseph's brothers had taken the sheep to graze. Jacob became concerned, so he sent Joseph to check on them. When they saw him from a distance, their envy and hostility took complete control over them. They began to provoke each other to kill him. The Hebrew words signify a brutal, violent execution. They began to prepare the life they would spend to their father. By killing Joseph, they would remove the possibility of his dreams would ever come true. They plotted to toss Joseph into a pit and leave him for dead. Jesus said, "A good man out of the good treasures of his heart bringeth forth that which is good, and an evil man out of the evil treasures of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh." Found in Luke 6:45. Our speech reveals what's inside. Joseph's brothers were full of bitterness towards him, and those feelings produced murderous action. Scripture warns against this, saying, "A sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy the rottenness of the bones." Proverbs 14:30. Also in Hebrew 12:15 from the American Standard Version, it reads, "Make sure that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no root of bitterness springs up, causing trouble and defiling many." And in James 3:16, "For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work." The struggle with envy is real. We may give in to temptation and secretly resent God for giving others what we want for ourselves. Putting on the mind of Christ guards us of this. Philippians 2:3-5 reads, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interest, but rather to the interest of others. Adopt the same attitude as that of Jesus Christ." And that brings us to our third focal passage, which is God can bless us through betrayal. Genesis 37:26-27, and it reads, "And Judah said unto his brother, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brethren were content. Judah advised the brothers to sell Joseph to the approaching Ishmaelites. Pretending to take moral high ground, Judah pointed out the indecency of the murder. Although Judah didn't want to kill Joseph, he had no issue with selling him. The decision made by Joseph's brother impacted not only their family, but the entire nation of Israel. Years later, Joseph dropped one of the greatest lines in ancient literature. He looked his guilty, weary brothers in the eyes and said, "Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive." Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers and sold for 20 pieces of silver, like Jesus was. Many scholars think Joseph's story is a prediction of the greatest story. Throughout the Old Testament, God points to what he would do through Jesus to save the lost. Taken at face value, the account of Joseph so far doesn't look hopeful. He had lost everything that mattered to him: his robe, identity, family, and freedom. Actually, Joseph's hope never rested in what he lost. His destiny rested in the hands of God alone, who intended for Joseph to go to Egypt. God worked in Reuben's heart to keep Joseph alive. He guided Judah to provide Joseph with a way to get to Egypt. God is at work in our lives even though we cannot always see his hand. When betrayed, we can find consolation in the assurance that what has happened did not catch God off guard. I pray that something has been said to encourage you, and if you have any questions about God's plan of salvation or want a better understanding of the Bible, please do not hesitate to visit the church's website at www.gbwtma.org. Leave your request and someone will be in touch with you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.